Students did IT with their teachers. At what point did your relationship turn physical? How do you feel about it now? Story 1. I did it with my high school gym teacher after I graduated. I was really overweight and just not pleasant to look at in high school, but I had a huge crush on him. After graduation, I lost weight and looked him up on Facebook. I said we should meet up for dinner, so we did. I told him I used to have a gigantic crush on him, which he didn't believe. He said I should go to his place for dinner sometime, and of course I was all for it. I get there, and he made a pizza and we had some drinks, then watched TV on the couch for what seemed like an eternity, just talking and joking. He led me to the bedroom and we proceeded to have some of the best time I've ever had in my life. Since then, he's texted me randomly wanting more. We've exchanged pictures and videos and sometimes called each on the phone, but never got together again. Conquest complete. Story 2. I'd been working for a professor as an undergrad for a couple years, and we'd be close. It wasn't an intimate relationship, but there weren't ever any boundaries. I'd been working for him for about a month when the topic of my birth control came up, and he chastised me for not knowing what chemicals were involved, how my birth control worked, etc. It was one of the most awkward conversations ever, because he's my boss. But he felt that it was important I know. Fast forward to senior year, 2 years after being hired. I've recently broken off my engagement. Fiancé had expected me to move back to my hometown and be a housewife. That was simply a no-go. I was feeling rebellious and decided to get my nipples pierced. The piecing itself went fine, but 2 days later I realized I was in shock and needed help. I had 0 friends, no car to go to ER in. Professor had put himself through grad school as a physical therapist and figured he had the medical training to help. He chastised me for deforming my body, but dressed the wounds, kissed the top of my head, and left. Somehow, that response meant I needed to chase him. I think the attraction was somewhat mutual because he kept coming by to check on the healing progress. We started watching movies together, then cuddling, then spending the night. The relationship lasted 6 years until cancer took him. And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him and miss him terribly. Story 3. I'm a male faculty member at a community college. About 7 years ago, I had this student in my introduction class. She was inquisitive, motivated, and very attractive. I usually give my students nicknames, secretly, as a device to help me remember them. And I remember writing on my attendance sheet, Jasmine, because she looked just like the Disney princess. I was always very professional and careful to treat her like any other student, so she didn't feel uncomfortable, as I was sure she might feel that way around the other drooling males. Well, she easily earned an A in the course, and we left for summer break. Fall semester starts up, and she is in my advanced level class. She sits in the front row, and again was one of the top students in the class. She was also one of the slowest students to pack up her belongings after each session. So we usually walked out together casually talking about the exciting parts of the lesson. About week 13 out of 15, she approaches me and tells me that she has a question she needs to ask, and if she can meet with me for 5 minutes or so. I was careful to meet only in public on campus because of the great stigma between attractive students and their professors. We met on a bench, and she professed that she liked me and wanted to go on a date. I refused politely and stammered something about school policy, despite every molecule on my body chastising me for rejecting. After the class, we became friends on Facebook, and she had recently taken some modeling photos and posted them on her profile. That was too much for me, and I sank into despair, wondering if I made a mistake in choosing my career over the perfect partner. Then, over the break, she emailed thanking me for the class. I immediately emailed back, doling out praise to her. She then immediately emailed me back, saying that she left the college and enrolled in the university. We met up and had our first date not long after. We're currently married and have been together for almost 7 years. She is the best thing to happen to me, and I would have quit my job had I known what life would be like. However, now I have both. I feel that being a professor was what impressed her because she is out of my league. Education pays. Education is key to success. Yet in this case, it's a whole different kind of success they went for. Who knew that teaching could lead to a successful love story? Story 4. When I was 17, I got the chance to go to school in the States, born in Greenland, and so I had a senior year here. The English teacher had just gotten the job there according to the other kids my age. But what happened was, I needed help just speaking and learning English better, so she said she'd help me out. I'd come in after school and we'd do the flashcard, and eventually she started asking me what I thought about American girls, and if I prefer blondes, brunettes, and etc. Questions slowly got more personal until she gave me her phone number, told me to call her at 8 and she'll have plans. I was confused as hell, but when I got to her house, my other head took over the thinking. Story 5. She was a 23-year-old 5'2" beautiful French teacher. Bonus points as she was actually French. I was quite good at French, and when we had practice sessions for our oral exam speaking French to an examiner, I always flirted like crazy with her. On the last day of school, I got to talking to her and told her that I needed a coffee and to come with me. She did, and we hit it off. We met up several times, and the night before she had to head back France, I made my move and ended up doing it all night. Rumors got spread around as we were seen together several times, and the whole town knew in the end. Ended up going out for about 6 months before I met my current girlfriend in university. It came to an end, and I still look fondly back at our time together. As a bonus fact, I am now a teacher at the school where this all happened, and all the teachers always tease me about it in the staff room. But it appears that French was not the only subject covered in classes. I was only expecting to learn how to speak French, but you taught me the language of love. Story 6. Not a teacher, but I did sleep with the teacher assistant in my 11th grade math class when I turned 18 sometime later. She was studying to become a high school teacher, 21 at the time, and she'd always get flustered around me when I asked for help. One day I asked her for help, and she asked me for help in return on her Spanish homework. I was helping her out and teaching her how to pronounce something. She couldn't make the sound needed, so I jokingly said she needed to be better with her tongue, rolling the R. She said, innocently, no innuendo, that she is plenty good with her tongue. She just doesn't get how to use it. In this case, I said I could teach her how to use her tongue anyway. She needed to, not really thinking about it when I said it. She got really flustered and said she had to go. The rest of her term as teacher assistant, she pretty much avoided me unless forced, by the teacher, to help me with math. She ends up finishing her teacher assistant spot a few weeks before the end of the year. Fast forward to my 12th grade year. A couple months after turning 18, I get a text from her. She apparently got my number from another girl in class. She wished me a happy birthday and all that jazz. Kind of weird, didn't think much of it. Another month goes by and she drunk texts me. Pretty innocent. Same thing a week later. A few weeks later, the same thing. Finally, out of the blue, a few more weeks later, she texts me asking how I'm enjoying being legal. She went from there basically saying, we should do it. I asked her when she started thinking that, etc. She answered but said the alcohol finally gave her courage to tell me. I told her if she can tell me sober that she wants to do it. We can meet for coffee and see where things go. We did just that. One thing led to another. We did it a lot for a few months, until she started catching feelings. We called it at that and speak once every few months. Story 7. Well, I was 17 at the time. Not sure how old she was, but I would guess early 30s. I always found her attractive, but I didn't really think much of it since I never expected anything to happen. I would assume most people wouldn't think anything is going to happen. Students were assigned a guidance counselor for academic questions, and the psychological counselor was in another spot in the school. She was the academic counselor, so occasionally I would go down there and ask whatever it was I needed to know. I'm not very organized, so I'm sure I went down there a few times a year. After a while, I would visit, just to say hello, because she was friendly, and I was a 17-year-old who got the attention of an attractive woman, so come on, give me a break here. Anyway, I go down there one afternoon and say hello and chat a little, and after a while she asked me how my dating life is going. Well, to be honest, not very well. I'm a quiet guy, not shy, but quiet, and I'm just not confident enough as a person yet to really get myself out there. So we talk a little more about dating and why I don't do it, and I go off to class. This goes on for a while, talking to each other about mildly personal things, until one afternoon I go to visit, and she asked me what I would assume is the question that changed things. How come you have so much time to visit me? I would stay at least a half hour each time. I don't know why she didn't ask this earlier, but I didn't want to say anything because she was kind of the only friend I had. I don't think she saw it that way, but I did. And I simply said, I like visiting you, so I make time. We sat and talked for over an hour that afternoon. A few weeks go by, and I'm walking home as a car pulls up nearby, and she gives a little honk and waves. But not the kind of wave like the wave you'd give to a friend or a coworker or whatever. It was a flirty wave, but of course at the time I didn't consider it flirty because that was fucking insane to me. Several more weeks pass, and I spot her car, waiting for me now across the street. I wave and start walking, but she leans her head out the window and asks if I need a lift. I say, sure, why not? We begin to drive, and she says, I just need to drop some things off at my apartment. Is that okay? I was having a fit, but my brain is saying don't be ridiculous. That is a fantasy, and reality is different. She's just giving you a lift, so shut up. I was wrong. We get to her apartment, and she says I can wait on the couch. She comes back from some room, sits down, and she starts telling me about how she hasn't been with anyone for over a year, and it's affecting her job because she can't concentrate. I say nothing, frozen in hormonal fear. She looks at me in a way I've never seen her do, puts her hand on my leg and says, out of all the students I talk to, I'm the most comfortable with you. She puts her hand on the back of my head, while this entire time I'm frozen. I don't know what to do, what to say, nothing. She tells me to relax. Grabs my hand, leads me to her bedroom, and the rest is history. Now we know what helps academic success. Letting your teacher teach other things. Way to improve your extracurriculars. Story 8. In grad school, I was a research assistant for a professor in her late 30s. Brilliant woman. Gorgeous redhead. There was a lot of tension. You could tell there was mutual attraction. Our relationship gradually veered into the personal. We would get lunch, drinks together, talk about personal things. Deep stuff like the purpose of life. Her husband, also a professor, was away for the week on conference. We had a meeting to discuss a project of mine. She rescheduled to her home. I had an idea what might be up. I arrived to a cliché. She opened the door in a robe, dropped it once we got inside. She looked me in the eyes and asked me if I wanted to go to bed with her. We had this kind of relationship for the 2 years until I graduated. I graduated and haven't seen her since. My career took me away. How do I feel about it now? Don't think of it that often. When I do, I miss her, as a person, not just the experience. She was one of the few people I've actually considered to be a friend in my life, and a loss one of the 3 women I've developed feelings for. Story 9. I am currently in a relationship with my university professor. He is almost 30 years older than me. I am in the mid to late 20s. It was a serious thing from the beginning. When I enrolled into university, I was a little older than most of the students because I had worked before deciding to go to school full-time. We first met during a mandatory interview as part of the application process. Being older than most of the applicants and being a little bit more matured probably made me stand out, I guess. I remember thinking that he was a little weird at first, but we ended up having a really enjoyable chat about the subject I was going to major in during the interview. I didn't think much of it, though, and was just glad that the interview went well. We didn't talk again until I was accepted a few months later, and I saw him in the second week of class. Not having studied in a while, I was a little rusty and struggled at first with the rigorous curriculum, so I took the initiative to make appointments with the lecturers for the modules I was having problems with. He was one of them. It is a small private university, and classes were small too, so after 1 or 2 such appointments, he definitely knew who I was. As in, I wasn't just another face in the lecture theater to him. He was a very popular lecturer in school. Brilliant, great sense of humor, and dedicated. He was well-liked and adored by his students, both current and past. I thought he was a good teacher. I thought most of my lecturers were good teachers, actually, but wasn't as impressed by him as my classmates were. And anyway, I was there to study and get my degree. It was pretty much the only thing I was focused on, and I wasn't there to date anyone, much less a professor. Sometime during the middle of the academic year, I made an appointment to meet with him to go over questions and to clear my doubts. I absolutely hated it, when I couldn't understand a concept no matter how much I tried, regardless of subject, and would always try to clear it up as soon as possible. We would normally meet on campus, but this one time it was a public holiday long weekend, so campus wasn't opened. So he asked if I would be comfortable meeting at his place instead. He assured me it would be completely safe and we can go over as much material as we wanted. By this time of the year, we had already been exchanging emails rather frequently, talking about pretty much everything under the sun. I got the feeling that he liked me, but I tried not to read too much into it. I was starting to like him too. I cautiously accepted his suggestion, but at the same time not wanting to come off as having a silly schoolgirl crush. That day at his place could probably be considered the first day of our relationship. We went through a ton of study material, then talked about films, TV shows, then went out to have a simple dinner. Nothing else happened, but there was definitely something between us. We were both just excited and very happy to be in each other's company. Shortly after this first date, we went out to dinner again, and he looked straight at me and confessed his feelings for me. I did the same. I had been in a really crappy relationship about 3 years prior to this also with an older man, although not quite as old, and I'd since been very wary about men in general. He had been divorced for about a decade, and had pretty much been a loner and a bit of a social recluse outside of his work. In terms of personality, interests, general opinion about things, we are a good fit. It felt like I had found the one person I could finally let my walls down with and be safe, and clearly, he felt the same. As for the physical part of the relationship, other than holding hands and kissing, we didn't do much after that second date. We have been focused on other things for the past few years. The physical attraction was definitely there, but I wanted to be really sure before we took things to that level. He was fine with waiting. When it finally happened, though, technically, it wasn't impressive, to be honest, but we cuddled and talked for ages after that. Things in the bedroom have since improved, of course, through practice. I've just graduated from university, and he no longer works there. We've been together for 2+ years now. The very few people who know about us do not approve, for obvious reasons. While it is not illegal, it was definitely against ethics for him, as a teacher, to become involved with his student. It never crossed our mind at the beginning that it would be considered unethical, because we genuinely liked each other, and I wasn't sleeping with him for better grades. In addition to that, he is old enough to be my father. I dare not think about our long-term future, because I am not sure if it will ever be possible for us to conduct our relationship openly. But in any case, I'm happy with us now. Story 10. I didn't do it with him while I was a student. It happened while I was in college. But I did spend the night with my former PE teacher from middle school. He was the first real crush I ever had, and I say that because I was young when admiration started mixing with desires. And he was one of the sexiest men I have ever met. Incredibly fit, strong features, and his smile made every girl in the class sploosh. He seriously could have been a model if he was taller. Anyways, of course, nothing happened while I was in school. That would have creepy. But it's not like I didn't fantasize about it all the time. Joined our volleyball and soccer team, which he coached, in the hopes that I would impress him. Also always wore little volleyball shorts during practice. I worked harder in school because my pubescent mind thought that I could prove to him I was a mature woman if I worked hard enough. I was kind of delusional, but suddenly having tatas does that to a teenage girl. He was really sweet, and I spent a lot of time around him. I would sometimes spend my recesses talking to him. Never alone, I was always with my friends, who also had crushes on him. A few times he told me he thought my name was pretty, and that his great-aunt who died when she was 4 had the same name too. Now that I look back, it was actually kind of creepy, but at the time, I thought it meant we were destined to be together. He left the school midway through 8th grade, and by that time my crush on him waned. I also had my first boyfriend at the time, so he took up all my attention. Fast forward to the end of my sophomore year in college. I was back home for break and was meeting up with friends from high school. I had finally turned 21, the last one of our group, and decided to go have drinks at the restaurant bar downtown, right by the movie theater. You had to go up the bar to order, and since I was young and excited about being able to legally order drinks, I was the self-designated runner. So I'm at the bar trying to get the bartender's attention, who's currently talking to another dude, and I notice that the guy is familiar. I could only see one side of his face, but when he turned, I immediately realized that it was my old PE coach. He was still cute, though older and a lot shorter than I remembered. Being buzzed, I decided that it would be a magnificent idea to go talk to the guy who only taught me for 2 years. I was like, "Hey, coach!" and grabbed his shoulder to get his attention. He didn't recognize me, but as soon as I explained who I was and where I went to school, his face lit up. The lady May, I remember, and continued to talk. I had many mojitos by that point and wasn't paying attention. I was distracted by the thought that I had just met my girlhood crush at a bar, like a rom-com cliché. We spent a few minutes talking. I told him about school, how I was looking for teachers' programs. I wasn't studying to become a teacher, but my intended career path required teaching experience, and being back for the summer. He said his sister, she is significantly younger than he was, had graduated from the local community college, so he was there with his family celebrating. I told him to tell her congrats, and I was about to go back to my table when he asked for my number. I was a little stunned, but then he said he could probably set me up at the school he was currently at. He wasn't coaching anymore and was actually teaching classes, as a TA, and just needed some contact info. Alcohol makes me believe that I'm the world's greatest seductress, so I tried to be super flirty. I said something like, "I'll give you my number for pleasure reasons." Yeah, the world's greatest seductress. He laughed. probably at me, and told me I'll hear from him. We exchanged numbers and parted, and the rest of the night went okay. A week later, I texted him about possibly TAing at the school. I was in full networking mood, and wasn't really thinking about my stupid flirting attempt. He texted me back a few hours later saying we could meet up for coffee and discuss me possibly TAing for him during summer school. I was a young and inexperienced youth, so I had no idea if this was unusual or not, so I agreed. We met up that weekend for coffee and probably 10 minutes was spent on talking about the job. He kept asking me questions about my personal life and what I had been up to since middle school. After an hour and a half, he asked if I wanted to go next door to get a beer. I say yes, and we head over, and the conversation over drinks is about the same. After about one beer, I confessed that I had an embarrassingly huge crush on him in school. He laughed and said I was incredibly obvious, but since I was a girl, he thought it was cute. After he said it, I don't know, but something just clicked. I can't really describe it, but basically signaled the point of no return. Within 30 minutes, we were in his house, on his bed, just going at it. The experience was okay, but the fact that he used to be my teacher, that I had a crush on him and had imagined this moment so many times as a teen just made it mind-blowingly amazing. Never TA'd for him, obviously. Thanks for fulfilling my teenage dreams, Coach Hardy. Story 11. This happened a little over 2 years ago. I was the teacher, 25 years old and teaching ESL while working on my master's. In walks this 20-year-old Brazilian girl who proceeded to ogle me all semester. Couldn't even look at her. I would be trying to teach, scanning the room and making eye contact. And here she is waving her leg up and down. The other students probably thought, oh, absent-minded professor lost his train of thought again, as I'm sweating bullets and trying to get my pulse rate down. At this point, I knew something was going to go down eventually. The day the semester ended, we took the Pound Town Express for 18 straight hours. We're now happily married and expecting our first child in November. If you like this bunch of stories about frisky student-teacher actions, then you may like my other video. Story 2 is acute. See you there.